have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
Buttoning his jacket. I'm Ann Northrup.
And wearing my donkey tie.
Election's over. You don't have to do that anymore.
Well, we have a lot of news this week. This week after Thanksgiving, a decision from the United States Supreme Court on which same-sex marriage cases they will decide to hear is imminent.
If any. All sorts of possible permutations to that. Horrible news from Uganda. Maybe. They have moved ahead a little bit with the draconian anti-gay legislation amid objections from the U.S. State Department.
But in Mobile, Alabama, the horrible news has already occurred. This is a terrible Thanksgiving story where a vicious teenage boy beat his sister's girlfriend to within an inch of her life for being gay. The girl's family want assault charges upgraded to attempted murder.
A transgender girl in Maine was denied the right to use the girls' bathroom in her school by a judge.
The Boeing company doesn't want to pay survivor benefits to same-sex spouses of employees in Washington state.
The Associated Press bans the term homophobia from its style book for reporters.
A gay cruise line bans drag on board and then says, never mind.
What a story. An historic vote at the UN on LGBT rights.
On the eve of World AIDS Day, AIDS activists got naked in House Speaker John Boehner's office to protest potential cuts to AIDS funding.
And we have the pictures. They are safe for viewing.
You're going to want to stick around for that.
Andy will review the musical version of A Christmas Story on Broadway, the Broadway musical version of the
Gene Shepard.
The annual movie that has Ralphie sticking his tongue to the lamppost.
No, it's not Ralphie on the lamppost, but we don't have to get into that.
Oh, it's the other kid?
Some other kid. Anyway.
I thought it was Ralphie.
No, Ralphie's the kid who wants the BB gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he doesn't stick his tongue to the thing. It's another
okay.
kid. Oh, I forgot his name. I bet you Rich knows.
It runs for 24 hours. I bet I can find it at some point. We also want to continue to alert those of you who see us through the Free Speech TV network that they are in the middle of pledge weeks and will air this show on Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern Time only. But we are always available on YouTube or blip.tv or as an audio podcast through iTunes.
But in the spirit of A Christmas Story, we double dare, or whatever it is, the Supreme Court to tell us what are you going to do with these cases. The Supreme Court is supposed to meet or have met by the time you see this, November 30th,
right,
to sit down and discuss all these marriage and marriage-related cases.
They may announce their decisions on December 3rd or not, because they can do whatever they want.
Well, here's the thing, and of course, one of the big ones is the Prop 8 case.
Well, let's march this down.
Yeah.
They have several categories of cases. The Prop 8 case,
which is a state case, California case,
where all the federal courts there have ruled that the referendum passed by the voters outlawing same-sex marriage is unconstitutional under the state constitution, and the right wing is appealing this to the Supreme Court. We want the Supreme Court to refuse to take the case so that marriage can become legal in California.
Right.
Then there are the DOMA cases, which...
The Defense of Marriage Act, Section 3, which says that even if you can get legally married in the states, your marriage is not recognized by the federal government under any circumstances.
And you get no federal benefits. There's also a case from Arizona that deals with domestic partner benefits, and there are one or two others that are sort of tangentially related. So what's happening is the Supreme Court justices meet privately in their regular little conference, and they talk about all these cases, and they say, okay, are we going to take any of these? Are we going to not? Are we going to put them aside? Are we going to delay again?
And
what are we going to do?
They do a formal vote because it takes 4 justices justices to take a case. Now, by taking a case, that does not necessarily, say what the justices are going to do on a case.
Absolutely
just
not.
They think it needs to be heard. A lot of these DOMA cases, though, are cases on which Justice Elena Kagan cannot be involved because she was the Solicitor General when they were being argued before.
Well, I would say there's some question about that. She had some involvement, but I don't know that her involvement was deep enough that she really has to recuse herself on those cases.
Justice Scalia goes duck hunting or whatever it is, quail hunting with the former Vice President Dick Cheney and doesn't recuse himself from cases involving him.
But that could be a factor in the decision about what cases they take. Also in the DOMA cases, the crucial issue seems to be how much skepticism should be involved in examining laws that exclude same-sex couples from marriage rights. Should they
Mama bear, baby bear, or Papa bear?
Heightened scrutiny, rational basis, strict scrutiny. So that seems to be what that'll turn on. But I read something interesting this morning as we are taping. I have had this Machiavellian scenario in mind where the conservative justices, 4 of them, decide to take the California Prop 8 case so that they can delay implementation, even though they're going to lose on it because 5 justices will uphold the Prop 8 decisions by the federal courts in California. By taking the case, they delay that till next spring.
Well, and that prevents the country from, going down the tubes with by marrying homosexuals.
Well, here's an even worse scenario.
For a little while longer.
Here is an even worse scenario. The justices announced next week that they are not making a decision on taking the Prop 8 case yet. They're going to take 1 or more DOMA cases. They're going to hear the arguments, decide the DOMA case by next spring, and then, in light of that decision, whatever it may be, they vacate the Prop 8 ruling, remand the case for re-argument in the federal courts in California, go through the whole process again there, and then it takes 2 years before anything happens in California.
I don't like cursing on the show, but that is not Machiavellian. That is satanic.
Ugly. So all we're saying is keep an eye on what the Supreme Court announces next week or whatever.
I mean, the Supreme Court does send things back for argument.
They do.
They just did it with that, what was that case on affirmative action?
So anything could
religious
happen.
Religious liberty.
All possible permutations, but it's a little chess game that is certainly fascinating to us and will have a big impact not only on marriage rights and benefits, but establishing our standing as human beings in this country and what our general rights are.
Right. And in at least one household in Alabama, our standing as human beings is not very high. We are going to show you a local news report of what happened at Thanksgiving in a family there involving
in
a
Mobile,
lesbian.
Alabama, a young lesbian who was invited to Thanksgiving dinner by her girlfriend's family. And her family said, don't go, they don't like you, stay away from there, you've had trouble with them before, you really should not go. But she said, no, they're trying to be nice and I'm going to go.
And one of the things that's not in, I believe that's not in this report, well, actually maybe it is. So let's just watch the report and then we'll talk.
A teenager has been arrested for the brutal beating of his sister's girlfriend on Thanksgiving. 18-year-old Travis Hawkins Jr. has been charged with second-degree assault. The victim's family says he tried to kill Mallory Owens because she is gay. As News 5's Lauren Vargas reports, the family wants the charges to be upgraded.
He tried to kill her. He's lucky he didn't kill her. She's lucky to be alive.
Mallory Owens is recovering at USA Medical Center from what her family calls a brutal hate crime.
I didn't recognize her when I got here. It's hard to look at her like that.
The 23-year-old was celebrating Thanksgiving at her girlfriend's house in Mobile Thursday night when her mother says her girlfriend's brother attacked her just for being gay.
And she was invited over by the family to eat Thanksgiving. I did not want her to go. I begged her not to go, knowing how the family felt about her, but she said they're trying to be nice.
She was beaten so badly that she's now almost unrecognizable. She had to have facial reconstruction surgery with metal plates put in her cheekbones. Her sister Avery has been by her side ever since.
I want him behind bars for life. He don't ever need to be out, because if he does, he can do this to someone else, or he'll finish it off with my sister. He doesn't deserve to be out.
Her accused attacker is 18-year-old Travis Hawkins. He was arrested Sunday on the second-degree assault charges, but bonded out soon after.
We've got this. We're on top of this, and we're making sure that the case is proceeding down the criminal path.
Mobile's district attorney met with investigators Monday morning, but says she has no reason to call it a hate crime at this point in the investigation.
We are assessing her injuries. We are assessing everything regarding her injuries and her hospital stay, but at this time, he is charged with causing serious physical injuries to her, which is assault second degree under the laws of the state of Alabama.
Family and countless supporters who've heard Mallory's story want justice. They're asking for the charges against Travis Hawkins to be upgraded to attempted murder. Unfortunately, the DA is familiar with the Hawkins family. Ashley Rich actually tried to prosecute the defendant's father, Travis Hawkins Sr., back in January of 2011 after he shot his son, Hawkins Jr. But since the son refused to testify, she was unable to pursue the case further.
Violence begets violence.
Wow.
Just horrendous. And if that's not a hate crime.
Well, here's the deal. There's no hate crime law in Alabama that includes sexual orientation.
What about federal?
That's the point. You would, in fact, HRC has been in touch with the FBI and the Justice Department to suggest they look into this, because this would be a classic case where the feds would step in and prosecute it as a hate crime. But as we saw in the Kentucky case a few weeks ago, you need some pretty strong proof of this being a hate crime, and you have to establish a pattern of, excuse the expression, Associated Press, and we'll get to this, homophobia, before you can successfully prosecute that. And then how about this difference between the assault charge versus attempted murder? You would think this would be just obviously an attempted murder case, but I don't know what the distinctions are there. The idea that this guy's out on bail is
scary.
Very scary. So our sympathies to all involved, and you know, to what this guy suffered from his father.
Right.
So it's just a horrible, awful situation all around.
Well, speaking of homophobia, let's talk about what happened this week with the Associated Press.
Okay. Then we'll talk about the homophobia of Carnival Cruise Lines.
Yes, okay. I got that. We'll have that next. So the Associated Press has a style book for its reporters about this. These are the words you use. These are the terms we use. These are the terms we don't use. This is why, blah, 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 blah. So this week they issued a thing basically about the word phobia, and said, yeah, it applies to things like, you know, arachnophobia, fear of spiders.
It means irrational, uncontrollable fear, often a form of mental illness. You should not use it in a political or social context.
And the examples that they use are homophobia and Islamophobia, which were commonly used these days. And of course, the word homophobia was coined in 1972 by George Weinberg, a therapist who's a friend of mine. He wrote the book Society and the Healthy Homosexual.
So you turned to him when this story cropped up and said, so George, this is your word. What do you think?
Yeah, it's your word. In fact, you know, and he's often said, he says, this is what I'm going to be remembered for.
Not anymore.
Well, he's written a lot of books. He's also written about Shakespeare and things like that. But anyway, you know, he says things like, in his response to this, is homophobia always based on fear? And he says, I thought so, and I still think so, maybe envy in some cases, but that's a psychological question. He asks the question, is a snarling dog afraid? Probably yes, but you know, and so that we use the word mostly in context to mean anti-gay prejudice, anti-gay bigotry, and that's kind of what the AP is encouraging you to do.
Well, they have said use anti-gay instead, but I think this is going too far in the other direction. We have always debated whether homophobia was precisely correct when we're talking about hatred, when our understanding has been that phobia means fear.
Right.
But I think what we understand anti-gay attitudes to be is illegitimate.
Right.
That this is not some neutral discussion of, do you like chocolate or vanilla? This is trying to repress a group of people and delegitimize us and condemn us and hurt us in various ways, and that there are not two sides to that story. And I think to confine the term to anti-gay is homogenizing it too much. And I think homophobia may not be precisely correct, but I think it's a truer representation of what we're talking about than just simply anti-gay.
It has come to be used that way. I mean, it has come to be. It's come to
mean hatred as well as fear.
Right. Hey, ho ho. Homophobia's got to go. I mean, we've heard that at demonstrations for years. I do tend to use anti-gay bigotry in my own writing for the most part. George and I are good friends.
I think I think adding bigotry adds that element of inappropriate attitude.
The point is, we haven't come up with a much better short word that does it.
John Aravosis, blogger, I think really nailed it when he diagnosed the AP's decision as a fear of taking sides. That they're trying to be too kind to the right wing, and because they've always objected, of course, to the term homophobia.
Oh yes, they say, no, I'm not homophobic. They say this in their interviews.
I'm just anti-gay.
I'm just, this is God's will.
Well, this is an interesting conversation. I'm glad the AP at least suggested another term rather than outlawing the concept altogether. But I think it's not the right solution. But I like anti-gay bigotry.
Let's talk about Carnival Cruises and the gay cruise that was supposed to ban drag. Now, the interesting thing about this is
you probably don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race.
Is that the centerpiece of this cruise was RuPaul's Drag Race.
I do watch RuPaul's Drag Race.
But there were a memo goes out, an urgent notice from Carnival Glory.
Well, wait, let's back up a second. RuPaul's Drag Race is a continuing show of some years on the logo.
You don't have to explain that to them.
Some of them I do. And as with many other things in life, some of the stars of the show are appearing on a cruise to be entertainment for the passengers. So they booked it on this ship, and then they got overbooked. So they moved it to a bigger ship, which is the Carnival ship, but they are not taking up the entire passenger list of the Carnival ship.
Right. So Carnival sends out a notice saying, basically, this is Carnival.
Greetings, fun seekers.
Carnival attracts a number of families with children. We strive to present a family-friendly atmosphere, and in this context, they're telling people they can't do drag. We're sorry, to say that any guest who violates our policies and whose behavior affects the comfort and enjoyment of other guests will be disembarked at their own expense and no refund will be given. You got that?
These functions will be private.
Whoa.
Only the performers are permitted to dress in drag while in the theater. Guests are not allowed to dress in drag for the performances or in public areas at any time during the cruise.
There's an uproar over this.
Well, there should be.
So they changed their tune.
Wait a minute. You're leaving out an important part of this. Al and Chuck Travel, which booked this and which is a major sponsor of RuPaul's Drag Race, was inundated with complaints from cruisers saying, how could you book us on this ship? How can you let them do this to us? Here's what Al of Al and Chuck Travel responded.
Now, is this before after the 9/11 thing?
Well, this is part of it.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was going to get
Carnival's
into.
no costumes rule is not meant to be an insult to the gay community. As a gay business, we would not have organized this cruise if they were prejudiced against gay people. This rule goes for both gay and straight passengers that travel on all Carnival cruises. It is in response to the post-9/11 world we live in. It is meant to protect passengers and guests, not to marginalize a few, because we all know that a man putting on a dress is very, very dangerous in the post-9/11 world. Ultimately, let's use this opportunity to set an example so that all the world can see that the GLBT community can follow rules and regulations just like everyone else.
For those of you on the East Coast, that's LGBT. But that is true. It's GLBT on the West Coast and LGBT on the East Coast.
So this made
and in between,
people
you can pick what you like.
Even angrier, and they're ready to burn down the ship before they even get on it.
So Carnival, finally, they say never mind.
Well, Carnival rethought its position after hundreds, if not thousands, of complaints from those planning to travel on this ship.
They were trying to give out this whole idea that essentially you're in hiding, you're masked. We don't allow that, although they do. And
they do in all sorts of ways.
You have to look like your ID and all this other kind of stuff.
Well, that
it's
was
all
sort
about
of their,
security.
That was their cover-up in the end.
Well, yeah,
that was their motivation.
They're paying people to come up with excuses.
No, what they said originally was, we have a mixed crowd on board, we have families with children, and you cannot be...
Can we hold hands?
No.
You and I could.
Exactly.
Yeah, see, gays can hold hands. That's just like we could always get married.
Well, the final bottom line answer is, never mind. Carnival loves us. You can dress any way you want. We are happy to have you aboard. Don't you rich gay people ever take away your money from us.
Well, let's go to Bangor, Maine, where they're the school there, Orono Schools. Orono. Thank you. Glad you're here.
I'm a New Englander.
Okay. There's a transgendered girl, and she wants to use the girls' room to go to the bathroom. And the school says, no, you have to use the faculty room, which is a separate, one-person room thing. And the girl and her family went to court over this, and the judge said, well, we're not unsympathetic to her plight, but the school has given you an accommodation. They're not mistreating you, and so that's not really harassment and discrimination. They're not indifferent to your situation, but they've come up with a solution, and you're going to have to deal with that. So the girl's parents are thinking of, appealing this decision because this, this puts a lot of limitations on how the human rights law is used when you say, well, if you can have separate but equal and all that other kind of stuff.
Exactly. It's still creating a separate category, which seems
it always comes down to bathrooms, doesn't it?
Well, in New Hampshire, next door to Maine, it's coming down to felonies and jail time. We have told you about the election of Stacey Marie Lawton, a transgender woman, to the New Hampshire House of Representatives in the election a couple of weeks ago. Evidently the first transgender person elected to a state legislature. But now it turns out that she was arrested 4 years ago for credit card fraud, did 4.5 months in jail, also has a record of slashing someone's tires and misusing public services and a bunch of other stuff. And it's, there is a Democratic official in New Hampshire who says this is really a tragic case. She's really a good person and is being held to a higher standard because she is transgender. There are others who say, hey, she never should have been running for office in the first place.
In Brooklyn, they just reelected a sexual harasser.
Please, I know.
And he's the most powerful Democrat in Brooklyn, Vito Lopez.
Look. New York, worst politics in the country. But it's a messy case, and we'll continue to see what happens to Stacey Marie Lawton, but it's just a sad ending to what seemed like a great story.
Well, there's another mess in New Hampshire. New Hampshire lawyer who works with the Anti-Gay Alliance Defense Fund. What are we calling them now? Alliance Defending Freedom. This is the right-wing, Pat Robertson kind of legal group. Her name is Lisa Byron, B-I-R-O-N.
Didn't we talk about her last week?
Did we? Maybe we did, but well, she was arrested for possession of child pornography and transporting a teenage girl from Manchester to Ontario to Canada.
Yeah, to be in a porn film. In all over the country last week, the Transgender Day of Remembrance was marked to remember, among other things, many transgender people who've been murdered. In the District of Columbia, the fire chief there apologized at the ceremony for the actions of the emergency medical technicians, the EMTs, 17 years ago, when they refused to treat a transgender woman, Tyra Hunter, who had been in a car accident. The EMTs are called to the car accident site. They realize Tyra is transgender, and they pull away and refuse to treat her, and she died. And this has been it was a huge case at the time. I remember us talking about it, and the fire chief, they tried to change their policies after that. The fire chief got up this year and said, "I'm sorry for what happened. We're committed to doing better for this community throughout the city." And you don't always hear straightforward apologies from public officials like that. So that was appreciated.
Did they have to pay for their?
It was 17 years ago, I believe. They went through a whole case, but I haven't researched all those details.
Well, not really apologizing is Cleveland Browns linebacker Tank Carter, who tweeted when he got upset with somebody, "You're a faggot for that," basically. And he deleted it, but then he kind of got very defensive and used other homophobic words like butthurt, so other players have gotten fined and suspended for this. He has not
yet.
As of this taping.
Now, I think
Tank Carter.
More importantly, and also not apologizing yet, the Boeing Corporation. Which, as you may know, has a big operation in Washington State, where same-sex couples are, in a week or so, going to start being allowed to be legally married. Well, Boeing is in the middle of negotiations with one of its unions, and the union is saying, okay, so now you're going to have same-sex married couples as well as opposite-sex married couples, and certainly you are going to provide pension survivor benefits to the surviving partners of the same-sex surviving partners who are married to your employees as well as the opposite-sex survivors. And Boeing says, no.
Nope.
We don't want to do that, and we don't have to.
They were unequivocal.
Because we are covered by the Fed, our pension is an ERISA federal pension rules pension, and that is covered by DOMA, and therefore we are not going to offer those benefits. Now, the real story is that they are not, they're right that they don't have to offer them legally, but neither are they precluded from offering.
No, of course not.
And if they want to offer them, especially in the context of a union negotiation, they are certainly allowed to. So they're getting a lot of blowback on this.
Well, the curious thing is why this hasn't come up before with this big company about why they don't provide domestic partner benefits.
I think, don't they? No, they have a very high rating from HRC, maybe 100%.
Then why,
I think
wouldn't they?
Because in other union negotiations, they have supplied some benefits.
Maybe health benefits, but this is pension survivor benefits.
Yes.
And not all domestic partners get those.
Right.
Right? Okay.
And this ERISA thing has come up all over the country in various contexts.
Got to change that, and that's why we have to win those Supreme Court cases.
That's why we have to get rid of DOMA Section 3.
And with marriage getting underway in Washington State, they did a Q&A in the paper there, and a couple of things struck me that I guess we've talked about, but I think are worth reviewing. The law, first of all, some people have gotten married elsewhere. Can you get married again in Washington State? Yeah, the law doesn't explicitly forbid that if you feel like it, but it's not necessary.
People can renew their vows all over the
well,
place.
but getting a new marriage, but you can do it anyway. Now, domestic partners, if they want to remain together, they can marry. They can get married right now or wait until June 30th, 2014, when the state will convert you to the partnership to a marriage, whether you like it or not. So you got to make a decision.
Well, if you don't want to be legally married and you are in a same-sex domestic partnership and you are under 65, then you must dissolve the domestic partnership.
Right, because for people over 65, straight and gay, they will not,
They are all allowed, seniors of any persuasion are allowed to be in domestic partnerships.
These are people where at least one of the persons is 62 or older.
Ah, okay, 62.
Yeah.
All right, now...
and divorce. You better recognize that if you come in from Idaho and you get married in Washington and you go back, you're not going to be able to get divorced in Idaho. You have to come back to Washington. One of you has got to establish residency in Washington. This is very complicated.
I would say that is yet to be litigated in Idaho.
That's true, but at the moment, that's the way it is.
Historically, states see granting such divorces as an acknowledgement of marriage, which they feel disinclined to do, especially if they have a state constitutional amendment against it. But I believe there are cases where states have granted divorces.
One of my right-wing brothers said when this whole thing got started, this is going to be a mess. It's going to be different all over the place. I said, being a mess is better than not having any rights at all.
And whose fault is it that it's a mess? Not ours. It's yours.
Right.
Not you specifically, but you know what I mean.
All right.
Now, also an interesting little decision from San Francisco. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals Judicial Council has ordered a federal court there to pay domestic partner benefits, health insurance costs, for a federal court employee's partner because of all the anti-DOMA decisions that have happened so far. So they're reading those decisions and saying, okay, this is what the trend is, so we're going to go along with this version and say you have to pay those costs. All this, of course, will all be part of what happens with these Supreme Court DOMA cases. But meanwhile, trying to capitalize on the success we had in the elections a couple of weeks ago with the winning all the marriage referenda, the Human Rights Campaign has come out with a new TV ad, which they have been running on the Sunday talk shows this last weekend and on MSNBC. I saw it.
I hope they're running it on CNN.
Well, they've paid $250,000 to run it for a week from November 25th to December 2nd. And it is airing nationally on places like Meet the Press and MSNBC. And it is narrated by Morgan Freeman, who donated his services. Here we go.
America stands at the dawn of a new day. Freedom, justice, and human dignity have always guided our journey toward a more perfect union. Now, across our country, we are standing together for the right of gay and lesbian Americans to marry the person they love. And with historic victories for marriage, we've delivered a mandate for full equality. The wind is at our back, but our journey has just begun. Join us.
As our director, Rich, reminded us, It's Morning in Gay America, it did remind me of the Ronald Reagan It's Morning in America ads that they did.
My first reaction is, really? And then I thought, well, I read that someone thinks this has been positioned to influence the Supreme Court Justices Conference and their decisions on what cases
They listened to Morgan Freeman.
Well, perhaps.
We hope.
And it's also thought to be setting up the road to more victories in referenda around the country in the next couple of years in states that seem vulnerable to winning.
They're going to have to run it on one of those hunting channels if they're going to get to some of these justices.
No, as you have always said, you go after the people who are your sympathizers, not your foes.
But you said influence the Supreme Court. That's what I'm thinking about.
Well, you influence the people on the court who agree with us.
Ah. Okay. Well.
But what do you think, And why do you say they have to run it on CNN?
Oh, no, just everywhere, that's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they get it out there widely. In other words, not just MSNBC, the liberal channel.
Well, it'll be interesting to see whether 1 week of running it is keyed to this Supreme Court conference or whether they have bigger things in mind.
Put it on Fox. Maybe Fox will cut it off the way they cut off that reporter the other day who criticized them.
Well, HRC also has something else they've issued. We told you they were working on a municipal equality index, not unlike their corporate equality index where they rate companies. Now they're going to rate cities. Well, boom, they've got it out. I thought this was going to take them longer. So they have rated 137 cities in the country on 47 criteria in, I think, 6 major categories.
My goodness, it's more complicated than the Olympics.
Yeah, but again, like the Corporate Equality Index and other things like this, it's hard to, you know, you can set up these sort of data points, but does it really give you a sense of how these places treat us?
Because, you know, I'm sure New York, what do we get?
100%.
Yeah, New York City gets 100%. And yet we know that in the enforcement of its own policies and the implementation of all these things, anti-bullying, everything else, New York is very lax.
Right.
So there ought to be some more qualitative indices.
Well, that's hard to do immediately, but if you want at least some relative...
They just have to talk to us.
Exactly. But we don't know all 137 cities. But if you want to take a look at this, you can go to hrc.org, MEI, which stands for Municipal Equality Index. That's hrc.org, MEI.
Now, on the marriage front, we have some sad news. We lost one member of one of the oldest couples in the community. They've been together for 67 years. Gus Archilla, Archilla, who just died on short of his 97th birthday. He was with Elmer Lockins, 84.
No, 93. That's
93, right. I'm sorry. He's 93 now. They got married in Canada back in 2003. Couldn't wait. And they all of a sudden started showing up on, and they had not been activists all their lives. No, well, you can read their story. But they really threw themselves into this and would carry a big sign about how many years together that they'd been. And, you know, they were very, very sweet guys. I knew them personally. And after they got married, Mr. Archilla said, "I feel a sense of relief. The maximum is getting married."
A couple of other news stories. In California, Governor Jerry Brown has appointed the first out gay man to the State Court of Appeals.
In San Diego, Todd Gloria is likely to become the city council president in San Diego there.
Although he sounds a little conservative. President Obama has nominated an out Latina, Nitza Quiñones Alejandro, to be a district court judge in Pennsylvania.
She is an out Latino, and she's Latina. She's also out about being a lesbian.
And he has now nominated like 8 out gay and lesbian judges to various federal courts. Several of them are awaiting votes and probably will be held over to the next Congress and have to be renominated. No reason to think they won't be renominated, but they're, you know, that Republican Congress is holding things up. In
Los Angeles, there's an out gay guy, Kevin James, who wants to run for the Republican nomination for mayor.
He's really conservative.
He has taken on, he's taken on this notorious Republican ad man, Fred Davis, the one who did the ads about, race-baiting ads about the demon sheep for Kathy Fiorina, Carly Fiorina, the I'm Not a Witch ad for Christine O'Donnell in Delaware.
I want him to
run. Anyway, and the Jeremiah Wright said that he has a history as a race baiter, but the ad guy, but we'll see.
The Southern Poverty Law Center is representing 4 teenage boys and 2 of their mothers in suing a group in New Jersey called Jews Offering New Alternatives for Healing, Jonah. It's one of these conversion therapy places, and they're suing them for consumer fraud, which is one of the first suits like this brought against these conversion therapists.
Of course, that would be,
thing.
it would be, now wait a minute. Now, is this a religious process or is this like a paid psychological process?
Paid psychological
Well, that's what
process.
would be banned if they passed that kind of a law that California passed, and they are proposing that in New Jersey.
Well, I think consumer fraud in general can apply to this.
Yeah.
We also talk often on this show about the need to not be narrow-minded and put blinders on, but to work in solidarity with other movements so that we can all advance. And I'm happy to see that LGBT groups are supporting passenger service agents from American Airlines who are seeking the ability to take a union vote. HRC, however, in this case, is not. The LGBT groups had a meeting to discuss this. HRC didn't show up at the meeting.
HRC gives them 100% rating.
And is publishing ads saying, fly American Airlines.
Don't they recognize that unions are one of the only large groups that gives our community big support?
Have been
We've got
loyal
it's got to go
friends.
both ways.
Yep. And these workers need, the LGBT workers need these union protections because half the states don't have any non-discrimination protections.
I got some good news and bad news in the Catholic Church. We heard from a viewer that the Knights of Columbus are under fire from a group called Catholics United Education Fund, petitioning them to stop their anti-gay stuff. I doubt that will have any effect, but I'm glad you're doing it. And the Catholic Church excommunicated a priest for ordaining a woman. He'd done it before, and they said, this is what you...
The Anglican Church just turned down the idea of women as bishops, and Butler National Golf Course members voted against women members.
My goodness. Yeah, the Anglican thing is...
we can have Hillary Clinton representing the United States around the world, setting up peace talks in the Middle East, but women can't be members of a golf club or bishops in these churches.
Well, the interesting thing, we can talk about it right now. The Anglican thing is fascinating because the vote was so close about allowing women bishops.
Well, it wasn't even close among the bishops and clergy. They were vastly in favor of it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It was the laity, which has been infiltrated by right-wing, because who's going to stick with the church oftentimes, other than as activists? Oftentimes it is the right wing in this country where people don't go to church. And they lost by like about 6 votes.
Yeah.
And a lot of women voted not to admit women as priests. But
Maggie Gallagher is going to these votes now?
The great thing about it is the government is furious. This is a state church. Cameron is going... literally said, get with the program to a church because it's the state religion. He's terribly embarrassed by this.
He should be.
He is, and he's doing, they're not supposed to meet again for 3 years. He says, wait a minute, we're going to pass something and you're going to adopt it. And this is going to change now.
Women.
Can you imagine?
People,
can you
women.
imagine? Can you imagine that happening here? No.
Look, I can't imagine that they voted that way. I can't imagine that Butler National voted that way. What's wrong with people?
Well,
it's the last stand of the phobic and ignorant.
Yeah. Sexism.
All right, can we move on to international news?
Let's do.
Well, Uganda is the headline this week, and emails have been flying.
They want it to be the headline all the time. Every time Uganda wants attention, they bring this up.
Well,
it's the only thing that Uganda's ever in the papers for.
I've been very
they're going to pass the Kill the Gays bill. Then we got news that they're going to pass the Kill the Gays bill, but they're going to take the death penalty out. They're just going to leave 10 and 15-year prison sentences for renting to a gay couple. Things like that.
I don't know.
Well, at least it's gotten the attention of the United States Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Johnny Carson is his name. But he spells it Johnie, which ought to be a woman, but all right.
Is it like 2 N's or something?
Yeah, 2 N's, whatever. But anyway, actually met with the speaker of the...
in a group or whatever. He met with the president.
Bring it up.
Whatever. But the point is that in Uganda, they have all sorts of issues going on. They're dealing with the civil war in the Congo. They're dealing with oil issues. They're dealing with their own internal political stuff. And so we become the scapegoat, and we become the easy thing to get the headlines and distract people.
And to show that we're standing up to the decadent West.
Yes, that too. And, you know, go ahead, threaten to cut off our aid.
Which we're not doing, by the way, what Britain and Sweden are.
Yeah. So we don't know whether they're going to pass this. We don't know whether, if they pass it, they will enforce it.
Tony Perkins thinks it's a good idea because the nation is a modern example of a nation prospered by God.
What it all does, whether they pass it or not, whether they enforce it or not, is they make life very dangerous for LGBT people in Uganda and everywhere.
Yes.
So it's, you know...
It identifies us as demons, essentially, that need to be locked up.
Exactly.
Or killed.
And so even if we don't get arrested by the government, we do get killed, as David Kato was, by local people, or shunned or abused or whatever. So we have a report from CNN, whose reporter was in Kenya, because that's a little safer than being in Uganda, about this whole situation.
It's become a rallying cry for the gay community in Africa. The brutal slaying last year of Ugandan activist David Kato, bludgeoned to death at his home. The state blamed a robbery. His friends said it was this: Kato's front-page photograph in a tabloid calling for gays to be hanged. I met Kato just months before his death. He was afraid.
There's space in Uganda to be a man and openly gay right now.
No, public space, we don't have that. We don't. By the way, the problem here is identity. I can be with you and my friend for a whole year. When you don't know that I'm gay, it's fine, you can drink and eat together. But the moment I identify that I'm gay, it's where the problem comes.
Now it could get even worse. Despite international condemnation, both Uganda and Nigeria's parliaments are set to vote through harsh anti-gay laws. Uganda's maximum penalty will be life in prison.
We're outraged because this goes beyond the principle of non-discrimination. It goes against the principle of privacy of individuals. And sexual orientation is really a question of the right of an individual to choose how they want to live their lives.
David Kuria, a prominent Kenyan activist, says it goes further. He says gays are often denied the right to healthcare and legal help. Their only option is to hide.
Being open about your sexuality has caused people to be killed.
Exactly. And in many cases, it's not even an option, really. It's either that or death.
But on the streets of Kampala and Lagos, there are supporters of the bills.
Our culture, our traditional culture, has no room for gays. And besides that, when we add on the Christian values, which have been attained by the nation, then certainly there is no room for gays.
I'm a man to woman, not man and man. It's bad. So I don't know where they get that idea from. It's a bad idea. We don't like it in Africa.
There's a law against gays in the constitution, so definitely they don't have a place.
Many countries in Africa have laws against homosexuality on the books, even here in Kenya, but often they are holdovers from the colonial period and rarely enforced. The problem comes, say activists, when new laws are pushed by politicians. Then it becomes very dangerous for openly gay Africans.
In this day and age, if we really believe in human rights, we shouldn't be sitting back and looking at a country engaged in that, for whatever reason.
Ugandan politicians could vote on the anti-gay law in a matter of days. If passed, the gay community in Uganda could live even more in the shadows. Dave McKenzie, CNN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, this does seem to engage a lot of U.S. activists who want to go out and protest and do petitions and all this kind of stuff.
Last week we were told not to protest, and then this week we were told protest.
Right. But I have to say, we're a country that only got rid of its anti-gay laws in 2003, sodomy laws from this country. And if people really, I mean, everybody seems to want to protest this government, and that's, what they're doing is awful, but I don't see a lot of support for the gay Ugandans coming from these United States groups in terms of financial aid and all that kind of stuff. It's just a lot of stuff that they use to show what they're doing, and they don't end up helping the people on the ground.
Right. SMUG, Sexual Minorities Uganda, is the group there that is doing the work locally.
Bravely.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you know, a gay Ugandan goes to London and asks for asylum, and the court there says, well, you haven't really proved you're gay, so we're kicking you out and sending you back, and we don't really think you're in danger back in your own country.
You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah. There's some confusion about whether the death penalty is still in the bill. Even if the committee that passed the bill took it out, they could put it back in. Is this being done by the opposition candidate to advance her career? Who knows?
Right.
Is this kind of condemnation going to interfere with dealing with the AIDS epidemic in Uganda?
Absolutely.
That's the kind of ancillary problem.
Two stories from Russia. Madonna is not going to be prosecuted under people brought a lawsuit for violating the Promote the Gays law, and that's been thrown out. But the UN Human Rights Committee has ruled against one of Russia's regional bans on all gay information, and this is a bit of a breakthrough. I mean, Russia tends to ignore these things, but the committee took it very seriously and made a ruling and said, look, you can't just assert without evidence that kids need protection from homosexuality, period. You just can't do that.
Yes, and this is a violation of free speech, too. Meanwhile, one of the Pussy Riot members who's in prison has been put in solitary confinement, they say, at her own request, because she was getting into religious arguments with other prisoners. Who knows what the truth is.
Things are getting hairier and hairier in Greece, where the country's going down the tubes, and that does tend to bring up a lot of right-wing sentiment. You know, people there would say it was never a great country for being openly gay, but there's a lot more violence, it's a lot more open, and it's a lot more official coming from this movement over there, which is called Golden Dawn.
Very scary. And next door in Turkey, the army, the government is going to pass a law throwing gay people out of the army. They have always rejected potential effeminate recruits, but now they want all gay people to be refused in the army. But meanwhile, Australia is celebrating 20 years of allowing gay people to serve openly in the armed
Would you
forces
just let us
there.
get married over there? Prime Minister?
In Libya, members of an extremist militia broke into a private party, arrested 12 men believed to be gay, and is threatening to mutilate or execute them.
Yikes.
Gay Muslims in France, here's a good story, have opened a gay and women-friendly mosque. Did you know there are 20 gay-friendly mosques in the U.S.?
I did not.
Well, there are, and now there's...
Now I know, and I'm glad I
watched
watched this show. Also in France, the president of France got in a little bit of trouble. Well, got in some trouble because he said that he invoked the freedom of conscience for those who may have to perform same-sex weddings. And then
Mayors could opt out.
Then he kind of backtracked on that. The gay groups got very upset.
Yeah.
But Carla Bruni has come out for same-sex marriage, unlike her husband, Nicolas Sarkozy, who was the president of France, although she's against feminism.
The third committee of the... I just let that pass. That refers back to other stories. Third Committee of the UN General Assembly has condemned executions, including those based on sexual orientation or gender identity, which is a provision they deleted 2 years ago, but now they've added it.
Well, the United Arab Emirates proposed getting rid of it, and they got some votes, and then the Holy See wanted to strip all references to it, and then that was all beat back by votes of about 44 to 86, with 31 abstentions and 32 absent. So we're making progress internationally.
Well, one of the most heartwarming things I saw this week, which I can't show you because it doesn't really have narration, it's just music over picture, is a video from the United Arab Emirates made by LGBT activists there. It's an anonymous video. You only see people from the neck down holding signs that they've written asking for rights, and they're talking about their lives. There's a cop, there's a nurse, there's a teacher, and they describe their lives as gay people and ask for rights, and you can see it on YouTube. It's called The Time Is Now Let's Talk UAE on YouTube.com. The time is now. Let's Talk UAE. And there's a Facebook page, LGBT Rights UAE on Facebook.
And Maurice Tomlinson thinks the time is now in Trinidad and Tobago. He is suing he's a Jamaican lawyer who's gay, and they forbid entry to openly gay people, anyway, he is suing over that, and that's a brave thing to do there.
Update on the New Hampshire transgender politician. She has resigned the seat she has won in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, Stacey Marie Lawton.
Okay, AIDS news.
Yes, World AIDS Day coming up, of course, this week on December 1st. And if you want Visual AIDS is sponsoring screenings of United in Anger, one of the ACT UP documentaries. If you go to visualaids.org, you can get the list of all the screenings. Here in New York on December 1st, you can see the movie at the New Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, the Brooklyn Museum, the next day at the Museum of Art and Design, and the Bronx Documentary Center, visualaids.org.
A revival of interest in AIDS.
And you can also see my web gallery of artists and
where?
On visualaids.org.
Okay.
And How to Survive a Plague, the other ACT UP documentary, just won Best Documentary at the Gotham Awards Independent Feature Project. And you can see that on your TV with video on demand if you just look up How to Survive a Plague.
Congratulations, David France.
Yes.
Joy Thompson et al.
Yes.
Okay, Boston?
Yeah, there are a couple of demonstrations by AIDS activists this week in anticipation of World AIDS Day to say, look, fiscal cliff, horrible for people with AIDS. It is going to destroy services, take away funding, just in huge proportions. So a couple things happened. In Boston, activists set up their own little Thanksgiving dinner outside Senator John Kerry's house to warn of the implication of these AIDS cuts. And in D.C., today as we tape, 7 activists walked into John Boehner's office in the House of Representatives, took off all their clothes.
Naked.
And they arrested just the 3 women.
Why?
There's a theme to this show.
The naked truth is that if Obama and leaders allow these cuts, life-saving programs will be destroyed. That's
3 naked women arrested for lewd conduct, 4 naked men untouched.
It's, as you have been pointing out throughout this show, it's a man's world.
Evidently.
And, well, what else?
The CDC has a new report out that says 60% of newly infected youth don't know they're HIV positive, and people need to get tested again. Let's go to your review since we have 30 seconds
I only
left.
have a 4-word review of A Christmas Story, the musical, which is based on that movie. Stick with the movie. Look, it's an okay show, but I always think I think this is a really good, funny movie. You know, charming movie, and it just gets a little overblown when they try to do big production numbers around very simple little jokes and things like that, and it loses a lot. But there's a little kid there,
tortured,
a little kid here about this high, who does a tap dance, which is almost worth the price of admission.
Probably a man. To be continued next week. We will see you then. Bye.
Okay, bye.